We have seen that India got independence in 1947, but that independence was only from the British Empire. Even after the 14 years of independence, Goa was still colonized by the fascist Portugal regime against the will of Goans who wanted to join India. In this video, we are going to discuss the Goa Liberation movement. Let us first look at the years from 1947, when India got independence from British, till the 1961, when Goa was liberated. After independence from British, there were French and Portuguese owned settlements dotting India's east and west coasts. French were holding the Pondicherry colonies and Portuguese were holding the Goa. The people of these settlements were eager to join their newly liberated mother country. Among the French and Portuguese, French were more reasonable. French hung on to their slices of South India. In the spring of 1954, the situation became increasingly tense. There was a vigorous pro-merger movement in the Pondicherry, and daily demonstrations in front of the French consulate in Madras. On 1st November, the French finally handed over their territories, which the Indians celebrated with a spectacular display of fireworks. But the Portuguese dictator Salazar was adamant and refused to hand over Goa to India. This was mainly due to Portugal's NATO allies, Britain and the US, were willing to support their defiant attitude. Though Portugal had a fascist regime, it didn't matter to Britain and US as long as it was part of their NATO. The government of India, being committed to a policy of settling disputes between the nations by peaceful means, was not willing to take military steps to liberate Goa and other Portuguese colonies. Let's see what was happening in a colonized Goa. A Goa Congress committee had been in operation since well before the independence. Its activists included resident Goans as well as exiles in Bombay. They argued that the conditions in Goa were far worse than in British India. Racial prejudice was rife and human rights wholly absent. In 1946, the left-wing Congress politician Ram Manohar Lohia visited the territory and exhorted the people to rise against the rulers. A wave of strikes and protests followed, which were crushed by authorities. On 15th August 1947, the Indian tricolor was hoisted here and there, but the protesters were quickly taken away by the police. Apart from the Goa, the Portuguese also held several smaller territories up in the Konkan coast. One of such territory was Daman, which had a garrison of 1500 African soldiers from Portuguese East Africa. In April 1954, the National Liberation Movement Organization (NLMO), Azad Gomantak Dal, and Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh agreed to form a united front for liberation of Dadra and Nagar Haveli. In July 1954, they seized the tiny enclave of Dadra. The next month, the somewhat bigger enclave of Nagar Haveli also fell without a fight. A year later, a group led by N. G. Gore entered Goa shouting slogans. They walked several miles into the territory before being attacked by the police. Several protesters were badly injured. The Satyagrahis were put in Fort Agoda prison. There they spent 20 months before being released. During these protests, in 1954 and 1955, the Portuguese arrested more than 2,000 people. For 14 years, India pursued diplomatic efforts to resolve Goa dispute. But once again, it was proved that peaceful methods don't always work with authoritarian mindset. The adamant colonial nature of Portugal finally compelled Indians to carry out a military operation called Operation Vijay. On receiving the go-ahead for military action and the mandate of the capture of all occupied territories for the Indian government, Lieutenant General Chaudhary of India's Southern Army fielded the 17th Infantry Division and 50th Parachute Brigade, commanded by Major General K. P. Cadwith. Meanwhile, the Commander-in-Chief of India's Western Air Command, Air Vice Marshal Erlich Pinto, was appointed as the commander of all air resources assigned to the operations in Goa. The Indian Navy deployed two warships, the INS Rajput and INS Kripan. On 11 December 1961, 17th Infantry Division and attached troops of the Indian Army were ordered to advance into Goa to capture Panji and Marmugao. The main thrust on Panji was to be made by the 50th Para Brigade Group led by Brigadier Sagat Singh from the north. Another thrust was to be carried by 63rd Indian Infantry Brigade from the east. A deceptive thrust was to be made from the south along the Majuli-Kanakonam-Margao axis. Hostilities at Goa began at 9:45 on 17 December 1961, when a unit of Indian troops attacked and occupied the town of Mulligan in northeast Goa, killing 2 Portuguese soldiers in the process. On the morning of 18 December, Indian troops entered Goa from 3 directions: Sawantwadi in the north, Karwar in the south, and Belgaum in the east. Meanwhile, aeroplanes dropped leaflets exhorting the Goans to be calm and brave, and to rejoice in your freedom and strengthen it. By the evening of the 18th, the capital, Panjim, had been encircled. The troops were helped by the locals, who pointed out where the Portuguese had laid mines. The colonists fired a few shots before withdrawing. In the smaller enclaves of Daman and Diu, the resistance was somewhat stiffer. In all, some 15 Indian soldiers lost their lives, and perhaps twice as many Portuguese. Thus, once again after Hyderabad's integration, India successfully carried out a swift military operation to integrate the only colonized state. Let us now discuss the international reactions after the liberation of Goa. On 18th December, a Portuguese request was made to the United Nations Security Council for a debate on the conflict in Goa. The request was approved when the bare minimum of 7 members supported the request, 2 opposed and 2 abstained. As expected, Portugal was supported by NATO allies in UN. A resolution was presented by the United States, Great Britain, France and Turkey, which first called for the immediate cessation of hostilities, second called upon India to withdraw her forces immediately to the positions prevailing before 17 December 1961, third urged India and Portugal to work out a permanent solution of their differences by peaceful means in accordance with the principles embodied in the Charter, and fourth, requested the UN Secretary General to provide such assistance as may be appropriate. This resolution received 7 votes in favor and 4 against. It was defeated by the Soviet veto. India's legitimate armed action after the 14 years of peaceful negotiations was condemned by the USA and UK, mostly due to their NATO alliance with the fascist regime of Portugal. Pakistan condemned it for the obvious reasons. Soviet Russia, Arab states, Ceylon, that is today's Sri Lanka, China, and African states supported India's action. Most of these states themselves had been suffered from the colonial rule. In an official statement issued on 19 December, The Chinese government stressed its resolute support for the struggle of the people of Asia, Africa, and Latin America against imperialist colonialism. A Moroccan government spokesperson said that India has been extraordinarily patient, and a non-violent country has been driven to violence by Portugal. The liberation of Goa is considered as a brilliant strategic timing by Nehru for both international and domestic reasons. In international context, Nehru waited patiently till the Republic Party government in America was replaced by Democratic Party government of Kennedy. This government was considered as more friendly with India than the earlier. In domestic context, the general elections had been scheduled for February 1962. Goa Liberation certainly helped Nehru in the election. Finally, in 1974, the authoritarian government of Portugal was overthrown by Carnation Revolution, which also led to the decolonization of all Portuguese colonies. On 31st December 1974, a treaty was signed between India and Portugal, with Portuguese formally recognizing full sovereignty of India over Goa, Daman, Diu, Dadra and Nagar Haveli. Thus, liberation of Goa finished the unfinished integration of India, which was started in 1947. In our next video, we will discuss the Sino-Indian War of 1962. Thank you for watching this video. Please like, share and comment because discussion is solution. For more discussions, please subscribe our channel.